Update for you. In court, Mia says, I don't remember each specific meeting, but I definitely didn't raise it in the first meeting, again, regarding her allegations of sexual abuse. And then she said, and Brian Steele asks, and in this next document that you just reviewed, the judge says, just ask her if her recollection is refreshed. Mia says, no, not to the specifics. And then we have a poll up. Should the 2013 birthday video showing Mia praising Combs have been allowed as courtroom evidence? Yes, 43% gives context to the relationship. 57% no, irrelevant to the abuse claims. Very, very interesting. Also, further update from court. Brian Steele asks Mia, you never mentioned sexual abuse until you hired lawyer Sean Crowley. I have no idea when I first mentioned it, except that it was after I had representation. You intend to sue Mr. Combs for compensation. You want money? Mia says no. Joe, that raises an interesting point. When Cassandra Ventura took the stand and she was questioned about her lawsuit, I was of the opinion, I don't think that really goes against her credibility because she had filed a lawsuit and settled with Sean Combs and then cooperated with the government. Like, what would she have to gain by cooperating with the government now if she didn't have this ongoing lawsuit? And they can make the argument, oh, a guilty verdict would definitely help you. She already had her suit. Why would she cooperate with the government, put her testimony at play, have to share these details with a jury in a courtroom and for the world at large? But when you deal with this and you deal with Mia and potential, financial motivations, is it different? Is it different, Joe?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, right? To your point, Cassie could have been great going off into the sunset and going and living her life because she got her case settled within 24 hours after filing the case. And so therefore, to your point, her case is over. She doesn't have a case to bolster or to make better by her testimony. On the other hand, Mia, someone else, that would testify that there was sexual assault, may be better off. Now, that being said, the other side to it is that when you consider the standards of proof, Puffy could get off in this case. Diddy could get off in this case because he has to be proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt, but still be very much on the dole as it pertains to many of these 80 or so civil cases because it just needs to be more likely than not. I mean, if I'm stepping back and I'm just talking about the potential for sexual assault, that's a little bit more likely, just like domestic violence, which we already know is there, as opposed to him running a criminal enterprise. So I think the answer to that and being a racketeer, the answer to that notion is that, you're better off for proving this case. Yeah, for sure. But, she's not a whole lot worse off if the case isn't proven because the nature of the beast is so different in civil court versus criminal court. So I don't know that she puts herself through that for just this reason because in all likelihood, if she has a case, it doesn't necessarily go away just because they don't convict him here.
Got another update from court. Brian Steele asks Mia, who have you worked for since? Mia responds, Madonna. For how long? 8 months from April 2019. When you did that, did Mr. Combs assist you in getting that job? Absolutely not. Okay, Alexis, we have a question for you. This is from Legs7K. Hi, Jesse and guests. A question for Alexis. What's her take on the defense questioning on week 4? Have they taken the gloves off, so to speak?
On week 4, well, I think the defense had taken the gloves off before. I think that we might be confusing that on cross. On cross, a lot of times it's going to come across as taking the gloves off because your job as a defense attorney is really to break down the testimony that they had on direct. And sometimes that comes across really harsh. Now, as a defense attorney, you can soft serve it, I call it, where you kind of take, like had been mentioned before, where somebody will say, hi, how are you? And they take the friend approach. That's not Brian Steele's approach pretty much ever. So I do think that they are coming at this witness, but I think that they have to come at her hard.
Yeah, they have no choice. Because, and by the way, this goes to something else. If you could turn the jury off. Well, I wonder if the defense will say, or just something for everybody to think about. Imagine for a moment, Sean Combs is completely innocent of every single allegation. And they are saying, you have people falsely accusing him. You have the government falsely accusing him, right? These people are going after him. Of course, We are going to question her very, very strongly. We believe our client is completely innocent of all this. How would you expect us to question the person that's ruining his life? That's another way to look at it. I don't know if they'll say that, but just something to think about. Okay, I have an update. Melba, I'm going to throw this to you. So Brian Steele says to Mia, so you were not blacklisted? No. No retribution? He took away the TV show, the credit I was promised. You told the jury you were surprised you were let go, right? I did. You were let go for drinking? No. Why is this so important to get to this idea of whether or not she was retaliated against, or whether or not Sean Combs could use his power to blacklist her in the industry? Why is this so important for this case and this line of questioning, Melba?
So there are a few things to unpack here. First off, I think that Brian Steele is trying to go after her credibility in terms of drinking. So when he's talking about, do you think that it could have been consensual intercourse that you had with Diddy, not non-consensual? He's basically trying to put the image in the jurors' minds that, well, she was drunk and she drinks all the time. So of course she doesn't remember whether or not she consented, and she could be making all this up because she's a messy alcoholic. That's the argument I think that he's trying to set up. And then he's also trying to minimize the amount of power that Diddy has in the industry. So in other words, everyone is saying, oh my gosh, I was afraid of being blacklisted. I was afraid of all these things. I was afraid he was going to destroy my career. But in fact, none of those things happened. So was that really their perception? Are they just saying that now to kind of explain their actions? So they're trying to make him not seem as Machiavellian, like he had control over everything and everyone in the industry. Like, no, they can go get other jobs. They can do other things. They were just fine. They chose to stay. So it's going at credibility, it's going at reality, and also in a way trying to basically bring Diddy down a peg that he's not this Machiavellian evil character. He's just, much to your point, Jesse, he's just an average guy who, yeah, he had some bad relationships, but, he's not a trafficker and he's not a kingpin.
Yeah, because blackmail, intimidation, threats, those all go to sex trafficking. Those all go to racketeering. Another update from court. Brian Steele asks Mia, you remember Miss Ventura's video called Official Girl? Yes. And King of Hearts and her song with Nicki Minaj, The Boys? Yes. And Nicki Minaj is well known? Yes. We'll see where this goes. Got a question for you. We're talking a little bit more, again, taking your questions right now in real time, but I got a question for Joe about this. This is from Etcha Palante. Joe, is it possible that witnesses could be called to testify to substantiate how Diddy's relationship with Kim Porter potentially mirrored what happened with Cassie and other victims?
I guess theoretically so. The first thing that I would say, though, is amongst the parties, they should already know who's being called to testify, unless you need to call someone as a rebuttal witness, right? The second thing is that, condolences to Kim Porter, but I don't know that you really want to focus on someone that's no longer here. Because, I don't know that any of it has come through in the trial, but there's been this whole larger conspiracy thing that, Kim Porter has died and Andre Harrell has died and all these other people around Diddy have died, and Al B. Sure almost died. So I don't know that that's on anybody's mind and that it's coming into evidence at all, but I don't think that she adds enough really talking about, and it has to come in some other way. It wouldn't come in from her anyway, in order for them. Just too many questions and too much, disconnectivity and maybe even negativity, so that the prosecution, I don't think that they're better off by making a presentation that goes through Kim Porter at all, that goes through someone that's not here, because you can control how someone is here. And in a worst case scenario, maybe it even makes people a little bit sympathetic that the love of his life is not around anymore.
Well, the way she's come up so far in this trial is, did the alleged victims of Sean Combs reach out to him after she died, right? Question about their credibility, but also whether or not Kim Porter was a source of jealousy for Cassandra Ventura. And there was testimony that Diddy had said, Kim was really the love of my life, and that's what ended the relationship between him and Ventura, trying to frame this as a relationship not of a sex trafficker and a victim, but a domestic violence relationship. It was a relationship between him and Cassandra Ventura that was filled with jealousy and anger and love, things that we see in a lot of different relationships, and not necessarily criminal, but toxic, and also maybe goes to the motivations of Cassandra Ventura. Okay, here is a good question. Melba, I'll throw this one to you. Old Hollywood Angels asks, can Diddy still be offered a second plea deal, or is it too late?
I don't think it's ever too late. The question isn't a matter of practice, but practically, yeah, you can offer a plea up until the jury goes in to deliberate. I mean, and I've had instances where that happened because, well, the state finished, as the prosecution finished the presentation, and it came even more solid and came across even better than the defense had anticipated. Now they're like, we're better off taking a plea. So it is possible. Do they want to at this point? Probably not, because again, you've got the optics to think about. But if you're not necessarily convinced that you've won the jury over, you may want to offer that plea.
We have an update in court. Brian Steele asks Mia, and Miss Ventura did the song Numb with Rick Ross. She did. And I love it with Fabulous? Yes. And do you remember Miss Ventura being in studio with Kid Cudi? I don't remember the specifics. And Mr. Combs himself? Yes. Which goes to another important question, again, whether Ventura's career was sidelined because of Combs or other reasons, or whether she had opportunities. But Alexis, this is a really good question from Skitlanta Commentary. And this came up during Mia's testimony about whether or not she spoke out. Did she not speak out? Do you believe the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement, had a lot of them confused? They couldn't say anything with the conjunction of the power dynamics Diddy had? It's a good question. What do you think, Alexis?
I think a lot of times when people sign NDAs and they're not attorneys, or they don't have an attorney that reviewed it beforehand, they are confused about what they can and cannot say and when they can't say it, because they're not attorneys and they're being asked to sign this. Also, a lot of times NDAs will be written intentionally, have stuff in there that if the attorney who drafted it knows that if they were pressed in court, probably it's overexpansive, and that the court would say, no, it goes too far. So, but people who aren't attorneys will look at it and they'll reread it and say, oh, it says this, I can't do it. And there's a penalty of some sort that is huge to them that they wouldn't be able to pay. So it does keep people from actually going out and saying things generally when there's an NDA. And that's the real purpose of it. You really don't want someone breaking the NDA and having to go after them. You want to stop them from saying what you're trying to stop them from saying.
Joe, we got a question here from Kay. Do you think he knew all along that what he was doing could be criminally charged, and so he purposely made sure Cassie paid for all of the escorts so he could keep his hands clean?
I don't know that Diddy thought very hard about saying, well, here are the things that I'll do. I'll have Cassie pay for this. I'll have this thing happen and that thing happen. So it couldn't be alleged to be a criminal enterprise. I think he's pretty surprised he ended up getting prosecuted because, among other things, the last time he was prosecuted, it wasn't successful, even though there's an argument that it could have been or would have been. And in any event, it wasn't on RICO. 10 years ago, they weren't prosecuting music guys on RICO, as far as I can remember. And so I think he's surprised on some level. I think that there is some level of invincibility, which is why some of the things that were done relatively in the open. And he thought he could, get to hotel managers and get to assistants and people to keep things from getting out. So I don't think that he looked to and around the corner and said, I will do thing X, Y, or Z to keep from having a racketeering charge brought against me, because among other things, I think he believed it was his town. New York loved him. People loved him. He knew everybody from the president on down. And so I think this has got to be a surprise to him on some level, or in any event, he did not believe that anything would happen to him criminally that he could not handle.
He got the key to the city. But not even that. I think that he legitimately believed he was going to make bail. I think that that's why he surrendered himself to New York. I think he was shocked he didn't make bail. And if he had made bail, I think this case would have been pushed years down the road. He would have tried every which way, house arrest. And one of the reasons I think he rushed to trial is because he doesn't want to spend one more minute behind bars. Okay. This is a great question that I don't know who to send this to. You know what? I'll do it to Alexis. Denitsa Lazarova. When constantly attacked during cross, aren't witnesses saying why they kept working for P. Diddy and kept sending him sweet texts throughout? The psychology behind it is so obvious. Why the constant attack?
Well, they're trying to discredit what's being said. The defense is trying to say that it was not said, that it doesn't make logical sense. If somebody was scared and they'd been threatened and they had, that they'd been overworked and forced labor and all of these really bad things, then why would you go and send years later? Because we're talking years later with Mia. Why would you go and send this video or these text messages? And I think for some jurors, they're hoping the defense is they're going to ask that question, even though the psychology may be clear to the individual asking the question. And we've had testimony about it. It's not so clear cut. That's the problem with this case, like mentioned before. They're saying this is relationship. Usually when you had kidnapping and, human trafficking and forced labor, they're not dating. We don't have we don't have previous relationships, or we don't have long-term relationships. It's maybe like an isolated event situation.
Update from court. Sean Combs' defense counsel, Brian Steele, says the TV show you mentioned, what was it to be about? By the way, this is what I believe she had said that Combs basically derailed for her. My experience, how a person from a small town dealt with a person such as Mr. Combs, a comedic version. Okay, this is for you, Melba. This is from LL. Can a court restrict courtroom access if someone keeps exposing the identity of a protected or anonymous witness?
Yes, but I think the goal is to make sure the person doesn't get exposed to begin with. So I think the judge is going to have to step up in terms of making sure that these little feed glitches stop. Because remember, the judge is in charge of everything that goes on in that courtroom. What media come in, who doesn't come in, if he's going to close the courtroom and just leave it jurors and the witness only, any of that, that's all up to the judge for the most part. So I don't even think it's a matter of, okay, we got to clear the courtroom, this and that. It's make sure that the feed stops showing her face and that it doesn't happen again.
Melba, I want to throw one more question to you. This is from RSS. Whatever happened to Jonathan Oddie? Now, we dedicated a whole sidebar episode to this is the guy who allegedly shot up a Trump property in 2018. And at the time he was interviewed by authorities, he said out of nowhere that he's a sex slave of Sean Combs and Cassie, that he signed a $5 million settlement. At the time, everybody was like, wait, what? What are you talking about? Years later, even at this trial, he comes up. Cassandra Ventura testified about him being one of the people that allegedly engaged in these freak-offs, and whether or not he was connected to footage that he might have had that he was going to release. Bottom line was, I think people look at it, we also dedicated another sidebar to it, that a lot of what he said might have been backed up. There was even reporting from the Daily Mail a couple weeks ago that there was a photograph of a signature page of a settlement agreement that might have been signed by Sean Combs where he was paid $5 million. And, you look at some of the receipts at the time, he might have been spending the money, Jonathan Oddie. So a lot of what he said arguably was corroborated. What do you think happened to Jonathan Oddie? You think he's going to play a role in this case as we go forward? You think we're going to hear the testimony from Jonathan Oddie, Melba?
Yeah, I don't think we'll be hearing from him. First off, he has pending criminal charges, to the best of my knowledge. I don't think that's fully been resolved. So now that's a credibility issue. So you're going to put somebody on the stand who may be in custody. Do you put them on in the orange jumpsuit? Do you, how do you even approach that? And if you can get that testimony, or at least similarly impactful testimony from other witnesses that are less tainted, why are you going to bring him into the mix? And he may have given varying or contrary statements in the past. Like, we don't know what else comes with that box of chocolates. So, he may want to just leave well enough alone and focus on who they have that doesn't have a criminal history, that can be a bit more sympathetic or perceived to be more sympathetic or believable to the jury.
Okay, and by the way, you have some sex workers who've testified, and you wonder how beneficial they are to the overall case. I mean, Sheree Hayes, the Punisher, said, everything I observed, everything looked consensual. I never saw any kind of discomfort. And I think you wonder whether or not he was just there to testify, hey, freak-offs actually happen. I mean, the prosecution has to prove that they happen, right? So he might have been beneficial there, maybe not beneficial in the overall case about a lack of consent. So this is interesting. We have an update from about what's going on in court. Brian Steele asks, what other films do you work on? Mia said, Dope, Lawless, Undefeated. You enjoyed the projects? Yes. And you called The People a second family? We all called it that. Combs says, you thought Mr. Combs was a genius at the time. You wanted to continue to work with Mr. Combs, right? I wanted to continue following my dream. What do you think the jury is taking away from that back and forth, Joe?
There's a question. I mean, the defense is really hammering on her that there's just entirely too much of a love fest going on, including after she's not working with him anymore. And this lends to that, right? She was apparently despondent, threatening to kill herself once she heard that the film company was going to be broken down, if I remember correctly. And so is she really somebody that's just, you could imagine a little bit of someone that's being victimized or some amount of someone being victimized, still kind of being in denial about, looking at the bright side of particular things or whatever else. But she goes out of her way so much, calling these people family, going out of her way, doing over and above, and then put that together with the fact that the first time she talks with the, with the prosecutors, et cetera, that the sexual assault doesn't come up. You want to mix all this up if you are on cross, Brian, what he's doing, mix us all up and really just taint her credibility entirely. Like, how is it that this person has so many positive things to say about Diddy, more so than they would? I mean, this isn't even explained by the psychologist, testimony before. Like, this person is going absolutely, totally overboard and using more and more examples. But of course, maybe to the point that that was made even earlier as I was coming in, there's some such thing as doing too much of that too, and beating a dead horse. And so they've got to, on their cross, examine, and look at and calibrate on how much of this really proves the point for the jury and minimizing her credibility, and then move on.
Alexis got a poll up. Listen to these poll numbers, right? And by the way, the polls are very interesting that we put up on YouTube from our viewers. We don't know if they're, representative of what the jury might be feeling, but here's the poll. If people around Combs allegedly witnessed abuse and didn't react, what does that say to you? 93%, Alexis, said that he had a culture of enablers and fear, and 7% say the abuse may not have happened. Wow, that's a drastic discrepancy now.
Well, I agree with the poll. I think he did was surrounded by enablers, but listen, the element is an enterprise. So there would be an argument that they were part of the enterprise, and that's why they didn't do anything to stop, what was going on. But getting back to Mia and him continuing Brian Steele to come at him, I think it's important to note, you can have someone who is sexually assaulted and they may not like that person, but still feel admiration for them because they think they're a smart business person or, whatever that may be. I think there's a division there. And I agree with you, Jesse. I think Brian Steele, it's kind of like, beating a dead horse, that he needs to back off and maybe move on. I think that he has established from what we've heard that it was a very conflicted relationship, that in one instance, that she, did feel some sort of admiration for him, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he allegedly sexually assaulted her, forced her to work, and all the other allegations. You can have both at the same time.
Joe, I'm going to go back to you because this is a similar question I asked you last time. This is from Carson Christine. Questions. Could the amount of deaths that have happened around Diddy Big, Pac, Kim, could that be brought into this case?
I think it's hard to bring it into the case, other than what you've heard about Kim Porter and going through another window in terms of trying to demonstrate Cassie's jealousy, et cetera. No, but it shouldn't come in. I think that would be entirely way too prejudicial. There's no proof that all of these other people that are outside of the case that he's helping kill, or he's making sure that they don't stay around, or that maybe he, fulfilled a promise, fulfilled a threat, etc. I just think that that's going to be a bridge too far, and that would never have been allowed, even if it was attempted. And so I wouldn't expect anything as it pertains to all of these other people. The real large 25,000 foot conspiracy theory that everybody talks about, I don't think that.
Well, can this come in? How about this? This is for you, Melba. This is from Poke and Pull. Can the prosecution use questionable lyrics Diddy used in any of his music? We've seen that happen in other cases before. You think it's going to come out now?
That's an interesting one. And I'm trying to go through mentally my former playlist, because I deleted it once I found out all this foolishness with him. Like what applicable lyrics would work. But I suppose if there's something really on point, especially in terms of his views on women, how he treats women, something like that, or if he has a lyric that really, sheds more light on the freak-offs or something like that, maybe. Of course, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of lyrics that talk about, this is my crew, this, whatever, that kind of thing. That doesn't necessarily say scream enterprise. But off the top of my head, I'm literally going through every song, and I keep coming up with Biggie lyrics, so that doesn't exactly help. Because I wanted to give an actual example. If I think of something before the end of the show, I'll definitely bring it up. But I think it would be tough because, again...
Oh, no. Right as Melba was talking about lyrics and whether or not they could be used, and we're talking about conspiracy theories. It just so happens your feed froze. Melba, how convenient. What are you not? What
is everywhere. He's everywhere.
They don't. People. You're giving us the answers. They're trying to shut you, not have everybody here. You're back with us, Melba. So what you were saying?
Okay, so yeah, sum and substance. It's not the same type of thing where it's a homicide case and then there's lyrics that speak of homicide and there's a direct nexus. It's more like, well, he's talking generally about his crew. Does that mean like it's an enterprise, or does it mean it's a bunch of friends that hang out every weekend? So I don't know that there's going to be a direct line, but if I can think of a line that would apply, I will definitely share.
Okay. Got an interesting update. And you see, we always make sure that nobody silences Melba on this show. Okay, here's Brian Steele asks Mia, do you, if Mr. Combs' company put more money into promoting Miss Ventura than any other of its artists? I didn't absorb everything. Who is Jason Wiley? He worked for the record label in budgeting, right? So as we go to final thoughts here, Alexis, they're basically saying, right, what was the degree to which he was, a detriment to her career, and was, I guess in the more extreme version, keeping her as a sex slave and not, allowing her to make any kind of income, and using financial pressure and control to force her into sex trafficking. I mean, I guess that's where they're going with this. They're trying to pour water on it, right?
Well, exactly, Jesse. They're trying to dilute it and saying, oh, well, you had this fear, but it wasn't true. He really wasn't doing that. And that's kind of a double-edged sword, because if he was making statements or making her or doing things to make her feel that he was going to do that, that's really enough. He did the threat of it. He doesn't have to actually on the back end go and totally destroy her. So, but I think that's where they're going with that testimony.
All right, as we get some final thoughts here, by the way, I have a sidebar coming out later where I asked, will Christina Coram testify? She's come up a lot during the course of this trial. This is Combs' purported right-hand woman. If you're talking about a racketeering conspiracy and people who helped further this illegal activity, you wonder whether or not she will play a role, whether or not if she does testify, she was granted some sort of protection, or maybe she's an unknowing alleged cooperator in what happened and just was somebody who can help corroborate some of what we've already heard. Joe, any thoughts on Christina Quorum's role in all this, or alleged role?
Yeah, not sure. I mean, we'll know once it comes across, really. But it's a double-edged sword when you hear about someone a whole lot, and one side or the other really thinks that it's going to help them quite a bit. And if it's not planned and it's not together, then you always run the risk of putting them on that maybe it doesn't end up being what it needs to be. I think the issue that they have, that the prosecution has, is that this case was always putting a square peg in a round hole. Diddy does not look, whether one thinks he ought to look like a criminal conspirator and a racketeer, he doesn't look like one. You have to create that case. He's not in a gang. He's not, a master criminal or known as such or whatever else. And so now you're trying to put the pieces together, and it's undermined by people that really admire Diddy. At the same time, they allege that he did things to them. And so now, the jury has to work through all of that and see how well prosecution can actually put all this together. But it is not a clean case, as has been said so many times. And that's all the more certain with the testimony that with Mia's testimony. I still think Capricorn Clark is the best witness so far because she doesn't have a dog in the fight quite the same way. But it underscores the difficulty that they're going to have with convicting them, particularly a guy that's well-liked.
So Melba, I'm going to give you the final thoughts here. I'm going to ask you, who do you think, as we began week 4, who do you think is winning this case? Because there are a lot of different factors here. We've heard a lot of testimony. It is the prosecution's case right now, so there is an advantage, but you're hearing the intense cross-examination. And by the way, we're going to do a sidebar later on where we're having Elizabeth Milner on. She's going to break down everything that happened in court, not only so far, but what happens now after this lunch hour, all the cross-examination, what we're going to hear from Mia. So who do you think's winning this case right now, Melba?
Right now, I think it's the prosecution because of the fact that they have so effectively sullied Diddy's reputation. We have heard things that are so vile that it completely shatters any image we may have had of him. So in terms of the long game, even if he ends up not being convicted, he's not going to walk back into Hollywood or the music industry the same way ever again. But in terms of the criminal case, I think that the sex trafficking charges have been well proven. I think that the prostitution charges have been well proven, and the prosecution is on their way to proving the racketeering aspect. So I think this is the prosecution's case to, I think they're going to win at this juncture. I think they're winning at this juncture.
All right. We shall see. Alexis Rosenberg, Joe Richardson, Melba Pearson, expert, great panel. Thank you all so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks much.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your amazing questions, your support. We love you guys. We are going to continue to be putting out these lunchtime shows every day. Because there are no cameras in that courtroom, because there are no audio recording in that courtroom, we are doing our best to be your eyes and ears, to break down these issues in real time, to get you as much information about this case, because it is an important case. It is a case of high interest and clearly a lot of opinions about it. So we will continue to do it for you. Thank you so much. I'm Jesse Weber. We'll see you next time.